Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar in support of motion 061, recognizing the crime of ecocide to protect nature, which will be voted on by the members of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature at the World Conservation Congress, which takes place later this year in Abu Dhabi. My name is Christina Voight. I'm a professor of law at the University of Oslo in Norway, and I am the chair of the IUCN World Commission on Environmental Law. And I was also a member of the independent expert panel, which in 2021 provided a suggestion for a legal definition of ecocide, which you will hear much more about in this webinar today. I will be your chair for the event today, and with your indulgence, I will start with some housekeeping remarks. The event is being simultaneously translated into French and Spanish and English, and you can choose the language that you would like to listen to by clicking on the little globe sign on the bottom of the menu on your screen, and then you can choose your respective language. We have about 90 minutes to engage with all of our incredible expert panel speakers, and we trust that there will be some time for the audience to ask questions at the end. At this moment, we also do apologize for the technical hiccup in the beginning. I hope we can extend nevertheless to 90 minutes. If you wish to ask questions, then please use the Q&A function so that we can use the remaining time judiciously. Before we begin, I would like to convey apologies from Professor Nicholas Robinson at Pace University, who, due to unforeseen circumstances, was unable to join us today. He sends his regards and apologies. He did provide invaluable advice and input on the drafting of motion 061, and we are very sorry that he is unable to be with us today, and we wish him all the best. Now, the idea of ecocide, which we will discuss today, is not new, but it has gained renewed attention due to the tireless work by the Stop Ecocide Foundation, and we have the foundation's director, Jojo Mehta, with us today, but also as a result of the proposed definition of ecocide by the independent expert panel in 2021, where the panel defined ecocide as meaning unlawful or wanton acts committed with knowledge that there is a substantial likelihood of severe and either widespread or long-term damage to the environment being caused by those acts. Now, the objective is to criminalize as ecocide the most severe environmental destruction and set it along the most serious international crimes that are of concern to the community as a whole through an amendment to the Rome Statute. In addition, and equally important, is the inclusion of ecocide as an independent crime or an aggravating circumstance into national and regional legislation. And here, for example, the EU Environmental Crime Directive and the new Council of Europe Convention on the Protection of the Environment through Criminal Law are telling and recent examples of where the proposed definition already has had an impact on legislative outcomes. Now, we will hear much more about this throughout the webinar today, but it is now time for me to address our distinguished panelists. All of your interventions are essential to our discussions today because you represent many disciplines and many parts of the world, and between you, you will address the many and various aspects of ecocide law, its rationale, progress, and implementations. I therefore would like to urge everyone to respect both your own time and the contributions of the following speakers so that we all can be fully heard. I will briefly introduce each one of you as I call upon you to speak. But before I call upon you, we are honored to have with us the representatives of 3 of these sovereign states which are leading the way on the global stage with respect to the initiative of recognizing ecocide as an international crime. And for opening remarks, I'm delighted to first call upon His Excellency Ambassador Odo Tevi. He is the permanent representative of Vanuatu to the UN. Vanuatu is the official state sponsor of Motion 061, which calls upon the World Conservation Congress to declare that ecocide should be recognized. In 2019, Vanuatu was the first state to recommend conservation of ecocide as an international crime at the International Criminal Court. Ambassador, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Christina. Unfortunately, I cannot put on my camera. There's something wrong with the camera, but at least you can hear me.
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, so Excellencies, colleagues, and friends, we thank you for all being here today. We thank Stop Ecocide International for proposing this motion to the IUCN World Conservation Congress. We thank the Democratic Republic of Congo and the Kingdom of Belgium for the leadership on this initiative, and the esteemed panelists for being with us to share their expertise. Vanuatu, along with other vulnerable states, exists on the front line of climate change and severe ecological challenges. We have thus both of necessity and choice been at the forefront of legal initiatives to address these challenges. In 2019, Vanuatu was the first sovereign nation to call upon states parties to consider the criminalization of ecocide in the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. Since then, the concept has gained considerable traction, leading to national proposals in multiple jurisdictions. Recent criminalization of offenses comparable to ecocide within the EU, and recognition of particularly serious offenses tantamount to ecocide by the Council of Europe. In September 2024, Vanuatu, with co-sponsorship from Fiji and Samoa, formally proposed an amendment to the Rome Statute to include an independent crime of ecocide in order to fully address the most egregious cases of environmental harm, both in times of conflict and of peace. The Democratic Republic of Congo has strongly expressed its support for this proposal, and together we have warmly invited all state parties to engage positively in these discussions, in the understanding that new tools are required to face new challenges. This is why we have sponsored IUCN Motion 61, recognizing the crime of ecocide to protect nature, which proposes that the IUCN study the scope and application of ecocide law and the ways it could support the restoration and rehabilitation of ecosystems, and which invites states to consider adopting ecocide laws at national and international levels. We hope today's discussion will lead you to the same conclusion that Vanuatu has reached, that putting in place a preventative law across the globe to protect the vital ecosystems upon which all our lives and economies depend will ensure a more responsible and safer future for all nations and all peoples. I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Tevi. Thank you for your words and thank you for your leadership in the initiative. Next, I would like to invite Emmeline Ouvel, who is a lawyer and advisor on sustainable development, to Mr. Jean-Luc Cruc, Minister for Mobility, Climate and Environmental Transition of the Kingdom of Belgium. Belgium was the first country to recognize ecocide based on the proposed international definition, and Belgium continues to be vocal and principled in championing this cause, not only on the global stage, but also at the level of the European Union. Madame Ouvel, it's a pleasure to have you with us, and you have the floor.
Can you all hear me? We did do tests before, I promise you, but hello, everybody. Thank you for the introduction. I'm really pleased to speak to you here in the name of Minister Jean-Luc Cruc. Minister Cruc has been in charge for a few months now, but he has already spoken publicly on the topic of Ecocide, especially in March 2025. At the time, he reminded us of Belgium's commitment in favor of environmental justice. He said that our actions should go beyond simple words, and we must work to translate this action into a clear, high-level legal framework. The minister intends to continue in this endeavor, that is to say, the leadership that was driven by Belgium as well as other partners in order to fight against extensive sustainable damage to the environment. As you very well said, Belgium is part of a great tradition to this end. To give you a bit of an anecdote, the minister was actually a lawyer in another life, and I believe that he cares deeply about the environment, yes, but particularly about ecocide, and this comes from his former life. In any case, rest assured, we will continue to maintain this Belgian tradition where we will fight against these crimes against our environment. Thank you very much.
Son intérêt, en particulier pour l'écocide, lui vient peut-être d'une vie antérieure, et en tout cas, vous pouvez être assuré que nous continuerons à perpétrer la tradition de la Belgique dans la lutte contre les infractions pénales envers le climat et notre environnement. Je vous remercie.
Thank you very much, Madame Uvel, and our regards to the minister. Our third state intervention comes from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, the first African country to demonstrate leadership, remarkable leadership, on the international stage by championing the recognition of ecocide as a serious environmental crime, both nationally but also across regional and international fora.
Thank you so much for having given me the floor. Excellencies, members of the IUCN, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. I'm here to talk to you in the name of Her Excellency, Madam Ibazeba Masudi, State Minister for the Environment and Sustainable Development in the DRC. Our country in the heart of the Congo Basin protects the second largest tropical forest in the world, where we have a huge network of river water. These ecosystems are essential to regulate the world climate, and their destruction directly attacks life on Earth. In the face of this urgency, we must consider the following. International criminal law is a necessary lever to prevent and sanction crimes against the environment, whether they be in times of peace or war. This is why the DRC, my country, fully supports the definition of ecocide proposed as illegal or arbitrary acts committed duly in a reality, knowing that this will cause serious damage to the environment, either extensively or durably. This definition establishes clear penal responsibility that is fair and dissuasive. We are also proud of supporting the initiative brought forward by the Republic of Vanuatu, the Republic of Fiji, and the independent state of Samoa, aiming to recognize ecocide as the fifth international crime within the framework of the Rome Statute. Ever since the amendment proposition was published, our country has supported it, especially in the 16th Conference of Parties at the Convention on Biological Diversity, as well as within ECOWAS and the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States. In this same dynamic, the DRC is considering opening a discussion at the UN Assembly for the Environment. This motion, namely, congratulates states who have subscribed Ecocide within their national legislation and invites African states to reform their legislation to integrate this as a crime. It recommends how to amend the Rome Statute so that ecocide becomes a crime. It also calls for the defense of the initiative in various forums, including COP30 and UNGA. It also requests that the Secretariat of the CMAE to constitute a working group in charge of drafting model laws that are adapted to African context based on the definition proposed by the ICC. Recognizing ecocide also means that recognizing that humanity cannot prosper without respecting the limits of our planet. This initiative will bring about profound change in public policy as well as the economic planning and investments. The DRC, as a solution country, will continue to support this initiative actively because it is necessary in order to guarantee a viable future for humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wombi, and please convey our regards to Her Excellency Deputy Prime Minister, Madame Bassey. Thank you so much to all the state representatives today for their interventions, but also, and most importantly, for their leadership of their countries in providing a path forwards for recognizing ecocide at the international, regional, and national level. We will now move on to our panel speakers, and we will begin with a judicial perspective. We are very fortunate to have with us His Honor Chief Justice Antonio Herman Benjamin of the National High Court of Brazil. He is a global leader in the environmental law community, as well as my predecessor as chair of the IUCN's World Commission on Environmental Law. Justice Benjamin, we're aware that you only have a short time window in your busy schedule to be with us here today. So without further ado, we will hope that you can tell us from a judge's perspective why ecocide law will be a useful legal instrument and why IUCN has a guiding role to play. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. In my bio, the most important point is that I am the predecessor of Professor Christina Voight as chair of WCL. Let me thank Jojo, Mehta, because Jojo and Polly Higgins spearheaded this effort that has led to the point where we are now. And without both of them, we would not be having this discussion here today. Unfortunately, as you know, Polly Higgins is not physically with us here, but she is twice represented by Jojo Mehta, because Jojo brings the inspiration, the knowledge, but also the energy that Polly Higgins had, and she doubles that. So I'm very grateful to those two extraordinary women. The idea of ecocide should not be something that would take us to the whole world of complexity. Since humanity began legislating, killing people has been considered an act, a criminal act. With exception, with a few exceptions that we are now all aware of, and we don't need to discuss here. So if killing one person or 10 people is considered the most severe crime that a person can commit, why is that killing the foundations of life cannot and should not be considered a crime? To me, this is very straightforward. This is very, very simple. We can make things that are simple complex, but from a legal perspective and from an ethical perspective, it's very straightforward. It's not rational, it's not logical that killing one person is a major crime, but killing the foundation of life is not an even more serious crime. The complexities are more on the international level, and I'm not going to discuss that here because as a judge, it's beyond what I can say and what I can discuss. I would like just to call your attention that motion 61 addresses both the international aspect of ecocide, but has a very clear guidance in already in paragraph 1, operative paragraph 1, that the motion deals with ecocide from both a national and international perspective. And the potential for national legislation in this regard is immense. And the leadership of countries like Belgium is most welcome. So I would like to say in closing that to me, this is one of the most important motions that IUCN could discuss and vote on in the upcoming Congress. This is transformative in terms of both international and domestic legislation, but it's also something that's it's absolutely needed in order to make sure that the legal system addresses the most widespread types of crimes, and here is one of them, if not the most devastating one that we can imagine. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you very much, Justice Benjamin, for sharing with us your reflections, but also your strong support for motion 61. Next, I would like to invite Nnimmo Bassey to speak on ecocide in the context of Africa. I would like to remind you that the Democratic Republic of the Congo has tabled a motion in support of ecocide law at AMCEN, that's the African Ministerial Conference on the Environment, taking place in Nairobi next month. And the topics covered in this webinar are similarly valid, of course, also to the context, the regional context in Africa, as well as Justice Benjamin just reminded us, to the local level in many places in the world. Nnimmo is from Nigeria and is a well-known figure in the field of environmental rights. He chaired Friends of the Earth from 2008 to 2012, was executive director of Environmental Rights Action for 2 decades, and now leads Health of Mother Earth Foundation, which is an ecological think tank. I'd like to ask him to share his insights on the importance of ecocide law for Africa, for African nations, and for the region as a whole. Thank you, Nnimmo, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. This webinar couldn't have come at a better time, so I thank Stop Ecocide International and all the excellencies who are at this webinar today. I'm so glad that the Democratic Republic of Congo has tabled this motion before AMCEN, that's the African Ministers of Environment. I also thank Vanuatu for taking the lead globally in this pursuit. Now, as has been said already, defining ecocide recognize ecocide as an international crime is something that should be taken as a given, considering the level of environmental destruction that we've seen in the world today. So it's really disturbing that this law is, we still have to campaign to have this crime recognized in international law. But be that as it may, I want to emphasize the fact that Africa, following years of massive environmental exploitation, should really be very concerned. So I'm hoping that the Minister of Environment, African ministers, would not hesitate to support this motion that I'm saying, and also for African states to model environmental laws that include ecocide as a cardinal point. Now, the challenges for Africa and why it is so important for Africa is that considering the levels of exploitation of environmental resources and what I would term extractive authoritarianism that has been put in place by both colonialism and other forms of extractivist exploitation that puts profit before nature, treats people as disposable, and treats the communities as having no voice, exposing many zones on the continent to become zones of violence and sacrifice. This law is so vital for the African continent and for every other exploited region in the world. I would also like to emphasize the fact that there's a new scramble for Africa, not just for our lands and forests, but still for minerals, for oil and gas, for so-called critical minerals like lithium, cobalt, and the rest. And in fact, the DRC is not a stranger at all to the level of exploitation that has built-in violence into our system. And so this is very key. The drive for minerals and for other resources is making ecocide or environmental destruction acceptable. And we know that this should not be the case. Particularly, when we compare, as was said earlier, what is taken as genocide as an intentional crime, ecocide also is not happening by accident. It's something that is deliberate, something that is systemic, and something that is persistent. And this also makes it so urgent for us to recognize this crime. Now, still talk about Africa. One thing that concerns some of us is that all the protected zones, environmentally protected zones on the continent, and the very fragile ecosystems of the various deltas are being exposed to unacceptable levels of degradation. And here I would like to mention the drilling for oil and gas in Okavango in both Namibia and Botswana, the drilling for the same resources in Swalom Delta in Senegal, what's going on in the Albertan Graben in Uganda, and of course, the efforts being driven at Virunga Park in DRC. Now, I don't need to mention the Niger Delta. That's where I live, and this is where we've experienced decades of massive ecocide. Display of what can be defined as ecocide is so glaring. And I'll just speak briefly on this, and I'll round up. The Niger Delta is a zone where oil and gas have been extracted for close to 70 years. And we'll be having oil spills, about 300 oil spills every year, every single year. And this has been going on for close to 70 years. It's equivalent to one Exxon Valdez oil spill every year. In fact, it's been estimated that since 1958, we've had much more than 13 million barrels of crude oil poured into the water bodies, into the land of the region. I don't know a better definition of ecocide than to live in an environment that is so contaminated. We've got very good reports, one by United Nations Environment Program. We've had a recent report by Bayelsa State, a state of the Niger Delta Oil and Environmental Commission report, which showed in one particular state, it's a per capita oil spill of 1.5 barrels of crude oil. Incredible. And then also in the same region, there was a well blowout that happened 5 years ago. That well is still burning and spilling till now. I don't know what's the worst example of ecocide than to have an oil well burning in full public glare and nothing is done. stop it. And so I just want to again say that it will be, this is time for African states to fully endorse, to join the Democratic Republic of Congo to endorse ecocide as an international crime and to make laws using this the definition that we've been given, the definition that is so appropriate, to model laws that can help us protect our environment, halt impunity in our territories, and decolonize Africa in a real deep sense. I thank you so much for this opportunity to share in this conversation.
And we thank you, Nnimmo, for guiding us to the African context and the importance of ecocide for the region, but also for individual national legislation. We know that you have to leave us soon. You're traveling, but please stay with us for another while, as long as you can, and join and listen to us. Thank you so much. Next, we would like to go to the Central American context and continent. I'd like to call upon, beautiful bird, I'd like to call upon Gustavo Alanís-Ortega. He is a fellow of the IUCN Academy of Environmental Law and a member of the IUCN World Commission on Environmental Law. He has been president of the Centro Mexicano de Derecho Ambiental, the Mexican Environmental Law Center, or CEMDA. He is which is a public interest law firm based in Mexico City, and he's been the president for over 3 decades. Among many other roles, Gustavo is a well-known columnist for Reforma. It's one of Mexico's most widely read and influential newspapers. We are very keen, Gustavo, to hear from you about the importance of ecocide law in the Latin American context. Gustavo, the floor is yours.
Gracias, Christina. Can you hear me well?
I can hear you well.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And thanks to Sue Miller for the invitation and for you, Christina, for guiding this session. I would like to start by saying that in the case of Latin America, ecocide as a legal concept is still not widely recognized in national legislation or in the criminal codes. But I would also say that nonetheless, there is a growing movement in the region to include ecocide as a crime. And also to say that different countries in Latin America are considering or have adopted already measures to strengthen their environmental laws, including the categorization of environmental crimes that may be considered as ecocide in some cases. And let me give you some examples. In the case of Mexico, there have been different initiatives. They have been submitted before the Congress to include ecocide as a crime in the Federal Criminal Code, all of which have not been successful today. The first one was in 2018, the second in 2021, before the Senate to recognize ecocide as a serious crime. There was another initiative in the year 2023 to add a paragraph to Article 417 of the Criminal Code of Mexico, including ecocide as a crime. Why this has not happened? And I think this is not only for Mexico, but I believe that sometimes there's not a clear understanding by the legislators about giving priority to the protection and conservation of the environment. But also I would like to say that there are other issues related to corruption, organized crime, and private interests that are against having ecocide in the criminal code. In the case of Mexico City, in the environmental law of Mexico City, it is established that there will be a jail and economic fine to any person that commits ecocide when you are causing serious harm to the environment because of emission of pollution, or because you're undertaking a hazardous activity, or because you are affecting natural resources in Mexico City. Also, I would like to say that the state of Jalisco has included ecocide in Article 289 of its criminal code. In the case of Chile, they have modified their criminal code to include new economic and environmental crimes that may be considered as ecocide. In the case of Argentina, even though there's no specific legislation about ecocide, it is punished the environmental degradation through the right to property, with fines that may include jail for those who cause forest fires that harm property or cause human death. In the case of Ecuador, there's a discussion and analysis process to strengthen its environmental law and contemplate ecocide as a crime. In the case of Peru, they do share the need to strengthen its environmental legislation, particularly what has to do with oil spills and other environmental disasters. In the case of Colombia, they had some advances with respect to the protection of the environment and the categorization of environmental crimes, including ecocide, through Law 2111 from 2021. And the last example that I want to give is Brazil. In Brazil, in June 5th, 2023, an ecocide bill was submitted to Congress by the Socialist Party and other organizations to be recognized as a crime. So in conclusion, Christina, I would like to say that even though we have this example that are a good trend, a very positive way to go, I believe that we need to do more in the Americas to recognize ecocide, nationally speaking, as a crime, no? And we have to push this growing movement to debate and include it in other national legal regimes. Many countries, as I said, are in the process of strengthening their environmental laws, including crimes that may be considered as ecocide. And I think we should also take advantage that we have the Escazú Agreement that talks about the access to environmental justice. So I would like to leave it here, and thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to be here with you today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gustavo. Thanks for your tireless work, your reflections, but also for outlining to the audience the road ahead and the work ahead in terms of recognizing ecocide in the Latin American context. We now turn to renowned conservationist Ian Redmond of the Born Free Foundation. Ian is a tropical field biologist, best known for his work with great apes and elephants. He has been a wildlife consultant with Born Free since 1986 and has authored many books and articles, reports, and scientific papers. He was an ambassador for the UN's Convention on Migratory Species from 2010 to 2024 and is head of conservation for ecoflix.com and a co-founder of rebalance.earth. Ian, please be welcomed and please help us to understand how ecocide law may support species conservation. Ian, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I'm thrilled to be following such distinguished speakers and particularly excited by the support of the Democratic Republic of Congo and Nigeria, both really important countries for conservation in Africa, and Vanuatu in the Pacific and Latin America. So this is a global issue. And so it should be. Because if you think of ecocide, the first three letters are the same as ecology, but also economy, from the same derivation for home. So ecology is a study of our home, economy is a managing of our home, and ecocide is a killing of our home. And I think that's perhaps lost on some people who see nature as a nice ornament, somewhere to go on a weekend or on your holidays to look at natural things and then come back to what we think of as the most important thing in our life, which is our jobs and earning money and buying stuff and being unaware of the impact that those activities can have on our home. So ecocide, the destruction of an ecosystem. If you destroy an ecosystem, of course, the animals and plants that are components in that ecosystem are also destroyed. But that works conversely as well. If you destroy some of the components of an ecosystem, the animals and plants, whilst still leaving it apparently standing, it is also ecocide. And especially if the species that you are harvesting, that's the word we like to use, taking from the ecosystem, are keystone species. Now that's a term borrowed from architecture. If you think of a stone arch, the big stone in the middle is what holds it all together. You build a wooden frame, you stack the stones, and when you put the keystone in, you can take the wooden frame away and it stands up. And that analogy for a species which has so many ecological connections with other species is that if you take that species away, the whole ecosystem will collapse. So how many individuals of a population can you remove before that ecosystem collapses? If you look at the State of the Planet report last year, suggested that the number of animals across the different taxa on average has declined over the past 30 odd years by 76%. So 3/4 of the individual animals, we're not talking about species conservation here, we're talking about individuals. And if you think of those animals as the workers in the life support system factory that keeps us all alive, losing 3/4 of your workforce is serious. That's what concerns me about conservation. We focus on whether a species is still here or not, presence, absence. But what about the abundance? It is thought that about a century and a half ago, there were perhaps 10 million elephants across Africa. And if you think that each elephant every day is eating vegetation and producing dung, which composts into manure and fertilizes the soils, roughly one elephant is going to produce about 1 metric ton of dung every week, 52 weeks a year for 60 plus years if they live to their natural lifespan. A century ago, 10 million tons of dung every day, every week, being dispersed across Africa. Dung which is full of seeds of the trees. So by protecting elephants, you aren't just protecting one species today, you're protecting forests of tomorrow, because they are the biggest seed dispersal agent. Likewise with other keystone species I studied, gorillas like the ones behind me, in the Virunga volcanoes, which this year celebrates its 100th anniversary, Africa's first national park. But gorillas live in 10 countries across Africa, and most of their habitat is not protected as national park. It's part of an ecosystem that provides, as our distinguished guest from the DRC pointed out, ecosystem services to the world. And therefore the protection of gorillas and elephants in Africa isn't just a matter of local conservation of species, it's a matter of regulating the climate and the weather systems that water the fields here in Stroud, where Stop Ecocide started. I had the honour to know Polly Higgins before her untimely demise. And so it's connecting those dots that is important, and realizing that when you destroy an ecosystem here, it has impacts elsewhere, and that those will impact on people as well as other species. So bear in mind that ecocide is not just an unfortunate consequence of an oil spill or too many bulldozers destroying a habitat. It can be a slow, insidious collapse of an ecosystem by the removal, particularly of keystone species, usually for commercial benefit. Subsistence hunting, indigenous people, they have self-regulating customs which provide restraint. But we in the industrialized world are spectacularly bad at self-restraint. We want more and more, quicker and quicker, and I don't begrudge anyone a better standard of living. But if that standard of living gets to the point that the consequences are that we are destroying our home, our eco, then there needs to be a law against it. And so I sincerely hope that the IUCN will realize this is a long overdue decision to support the inclusion of ecocide as a serious crime for all of humanity and for all of the non-human beings with whom we share this planet. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Redmond, for your explanations of the importance of species in the web of life and human survival eventually. And I just wanted to point out that Motion 61, which asked the IUCN to recognize ecocide as defined by the independent expert panel, is looking at a definition which is broad and abstract enough to capture the loss of species all the way to oil spills, all the massive and severe harm that is being caused to the environment. And it was a very conscious decision by the expert panel to not include an express catalog of specific actions, but a very general definition that could be applied to species protection as well as to other harmful environmental acts. Thank you very much for highlighting the need to protect endangered species. I would now like to go on and call on our next speaker. Before I do so, please, and I thought Jojo already put something in the chat, please, everyone, if you do have questions, put them in the Q&A. We have a couple of speakers left, but then we hopefully have a couple of minutes time to address some of the questions, but we can only do so if they appear in the Q&A box. I would now like to call upon our wonderful Jojo Mehta to speak to us, to update us on the global political and legislative developments around ecocide law. And there is a lot, I think, Jojo, that you can tell us. Jojo is the CEO and co-founder of Stop Ecocide International, together with Polly Higgins, as we've heard already several times. Stop Ecocide International is the proposing organization for Motion 61. Jojo has overseen the remarkable growth of the movement, and she is the primus motor, I dare say, behind it for the last couple of years, and previous together, of course, with Polly. She is coordinating between legal developments, diplomatic traction, and the public narrative, each one being equally important. Jojo, wonderful to have you with us, and please bring us up to speed.
Thank you so much, Christina. Excellencies, dear colleagues, dear friends, thank you all for being with us today. Now, the declared aim of IUCN is to enable society, economies, and nature to thrive together. And this mandate is, as we are all painfully aware, ever more urgent. Our global economic system has grown up out of a dualistic mentality that has led to unprecedented technological progress and societal sophistication, as we've heard from Ian. However, its attendant mindset, which is one of profound separation, has led to unrestricted exploitation, which is now in the process of destroying the vital ecosystems that sustain life, including our own lives and livelihoods. And this mindset has developed over centuries, but we don't actually have centuries to adjust it now. So we have to look to systemic interventions that can rapidly shift cultural understanding. And we believe ecocide law is one such intervention. Criminal law in particular is a powerful systemic lever in this context because it both reflects and can shift our moral sense of what is and is not acceptable. Unlike breaches of regulation, serious crimes incur both moral stigma and concrete personal repercussions, affecting both individual and corporate reputation, i.e. value. And thirdly, criminal acts cannot be legally financed or underwritten. In this context, the initiative to criminalise acts of severe environmental harm, or ecocide, has already gained considerable momentum at national, regional and international levels. And this follows the emergence in June 2021 of a consensus definition of the crime from an independent expert panel of lawyers convened by our charitable foundation, co-chaired by renowned barrister Philippe Sanz-Casey, and of course many renowned lawyers making up that panel, including Christina and perhaps also Rizwana, who I believe is due to be joining us if she can. The definition was briefly touched on by Monsieur Wombi from DRC. Ecocide means unlawful or wanton acts committed with knowledge that there's a substantial likelihood of severe and either widespread or long-term damage to the environment being caused by those acts. This definition, importantly, as Christina mentioned, it doesn't prohibit a list of specific acts, but instead it sanctions the severest levels of damage, thus steering decision-making at source towards better safety protocols. It calls attention not so much to the what, but to the how, and the how bad of dangerous practices and preventable disasters. And it has proved a remarkably robust legal formation, and it's inspired legislative developments at several levels. At a personal level, I can just say that before the launch of that definition, I was still able to read all the emails in my inbox. That has never been the same since. Ecocide laws have been proposed since then, or are progressing in many national and subnational jurisdictions. And I think for impact, I'm actually going to read the list because it's really quite long. So it includes Argentina, Azerbaijan, Bangladesh, Belgium, where it's been adopted, Brazil, Catalonia, Chile, where some elements have been adopted, Colombia, Dominican Republic, France, which has adopted its own version, French Polynesia, Iceland, Italy, Kenya, Mexico, the Netherlands, Peru, Portugal, Sardinia, Scotland, Sweden, Turkey, the UK, and the Ukraine, which revived an existing law. And in addition, diplomatic discussions have been variously supported by further countries. For example, Austria, Estonia, Fiji, Finland, Bangladesh, New Zealand, Niue, Panama, Romania, Samoa, the Solomon Islands, Tuvalu, Tonga, Ukraine, Vanuatu, and the Nordic Council, while parliamentary discussions have also taken place in Australia, Canada, Cyprus, Denmark, Greece, Ireland, Luxembourg, and North Macedonia. So this just gives you a sense, which is perhaps not immediately obvious because I think ecocide is still for many a new concept, but to realise that actually at governmental level and parliamentary level, there is a very lively conversation already going on. We've already heard that last year, the European Union formalised a revised directive on the protection of the environment through criminal law, which includes a qualified offence to address some conduct comparable to ecocide, and that is the first time that the term has been used in EU law. And what this means is that EU member states must harmonise their penal codes with this directive within 2 years, which is to say by May 2026. And while this may not be a sort of what we would think of as a sort of fully fledged dedicated ecocide law, it is nonetheless a foundational step in the right direction. And that also provided, if you like, a sort of foundational platform for the developments last year at the ICC, where Vanuatu, as we heard from the ambassador, put forward a proposal to amend the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court to include ecocide as a fifth international crime. And that was formally submitted to the ICC's Working Group on Amendments by 3 Pacific Ocean states, so Vanuatu alongside Fiji and Samoa. And since October 2024, as we heard from Monsieur Wombi, this proposal has been strongly supported also by the Democratic Republic of Congo. Now, discussions at the ICC are ongoing. Results and votes are not likely to be immediate, but it is nonetheless a very live conversation there, and perhaps provides a potential stabilizing factor in what is at the moment a rather tumultuous context of international law, because environmental harm has a universal effect on peoples and geographies of the world and is not dependent upon ideologies and politics. Ecocide law has also been explicitly supported in many different areas by international parliamentary assemblies, by faith organisations, also by indigenous leaders from many different continents, but also, interestingly, by business and investment networks who are now looking to pay attention to this the approach of this legislative change, because of course the real window for strategic behavioural change in those contexts is between when we hear about the law and when the law comes into play. High-profile global figures in many sectors have also supported ecocide law, including the UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk, His Holiness the late Pope Francis, who was in fact the first head of state to specifically support ecocide as an international crime. Also, leaders such as Chief Raoni Metuktire, perhaps the world's best-known indigenous voice, scientists like Dr. Jane Goodall, Philippe Sands Casey in the legal world, and many more from many different sectors. The fundamental issue here is really one of safety. The reality is that existing environmental laws around the world mostly sit in the regulatory sphere, and breaching regulation simply does not carry significant stigma. So there is no real deterrent to dangerous behaviour. Ecocide law provides a simple remedy by naming the very worst harms to nature as serious crimes, and this provides a foundational piece to support the rest of the body of environmental law. This will positively affect project planning, investment decisions, and also the development of sustainable solutions in many sectors, as well as providing recourse and accountability for reckless and irresponsible decision-making. We all depend upon healthy ecosystems, and we always will. Without the rich web of biodiversity, complex life on our planet simply cannot be sustained. And without the healthy functioning of Earth's key climate-regulating ecosystems, forests, oceans, soils, and hydrological cycles, no amount of emissions reductions will succeed in decelerating climate change. Protection and restoration of these systems is thus not a nice-to-have, it's a real-world requirement. Attempting it by voluntary means, however, is considered by many to be a virtue with a cost, and can therefore only ever produce piecemeal results at best. It is therefore imperative that such protection be mandated in a way that is simple to understand, simple to apply, and will be taken seriously. And a growing number of governments around the world are coming to the understanding that the criminal prohibition of ecocide is an effective way to do this. The present IUCN motion, to which we hope you will all add your support, aims to underline and to investigate the application of this growing understanding. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Jojo. Thank you for your work, for your dedication, for your timeless engagement in working forward, pushing forward the development of ecocide law everywhere in the world. So our biggest thanks goes to you and the Stop Ecocide Foundation. I think, and maybe you can confirm, Jojo, that we do not have Syeda.
No, I believe we
no,
actually do. I think she's managed to join us. So I'm very pleased to say that she's here.
I see you, Rizwana. I'm so sorry. I was just looking through the speaker list and I couldn't see you, but it's wonderful to have you with us. Syeda Rizwana Hasan is a lawyer environmentalist from Bangladesh, and she was also, well, a colleague of mine, a member of the independent expert panel, which, as we heard, formulated the definition of ecocide, which has proved to be quite influential in only the last 4 years, since it has been around since 2021. She is currently also the advisor to the interim government of Bangladesh and acting Minister for Environment, Forests and Climate Change. Rizwana, it's wonderful to have you with us, and we would love to hear from you, your insights on what you think the impact of the definition by the independent expert panel was. Why, in your opinion, has it been so successful in galvanizing governmental interest and support, and also, of course, your thoughts and reflections on the relevance of Bangladesh and in the Asian context more general. Rizwana, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you so very much. I hope you all can hear me clearly.
Yes.
We were having this technological glitch for the first few minutes. See, I would speak from two perspectives. One is the international perspective and the other one is the national perspective. I think it's very important to recognize ecocide by the international community as part of international criminal law because of the fact that we are living in an era of climate change. And if you see the problem, you would clearly find two different sides to it. One different side is the perpetrator, and the other part is the victims. Now, when the problem was created, perhaps many of us did not have the knowledge of it. But the fact that we are still continuing with the same things that are aggravating the situation is certainly something that's proving to be very harsh on communities, excuse me, in our part of the world. Many of us do share natural resources with our neighboring countries, and we are politically not placed with same strength. So when we share resources like forests, when we share resources like rivers, often for small countries, for less economically empowered countries, it gets very difficult for us to have control over these resources for the benefit of our own people. On the contrary, those who have more power, they actually utilize in a way that proves really harmful for communities in the other side. We are also experiencing trade deals, mining deals that are not going to the benefit of our community. It's actually benefiting clearly defined financial interests. If you take the example of what Shell has done to Nigeria, or say, for example, if I take the example of how the wealthy ship owners of the global north are continuing to send their toxic-laden vessels to my part of the world and really killing my forest and my beach on which lives of millions depend, I can clearly say that we really need to have an international legal regime to address this sort of criminal activities. Again, there are many international laws that we sign, that we endorse, but most of the international laws that deal with environment do not really have the enforcement mechanism. That enforcement mechanism is clearly missing. So I would argue from a representative of still a least developed country and a country that's faced with serious climatic and environmental challenges, we really need international recognition of crimes that are happening in our part of the world where we are actually playing very little role. If we talk about climate change, think about the 52 countries who will disappear from the world if the worst case scenario happens in climate change. So in the context of Bangladesh, Ecocide is very important. We are one of the least performers. We are 179 out of 180 countries in terms of environmental performance. We are having the most polluted rivers of the world. We are having to inhale seriously polluted air, and 35% of the pollution is caused because of transboundary reasons. Our forest deforestation rate is double the global deforestation rate. So for all these reasons, I think Bangladesh has every reason to be concerned about seriously dealing with people who are committing crime against the nature, and the impact of those damages are becoming irreversible. Similarly, when I think about what will happen to my country, 1/3 of the country will go underwater. I don't know where to go to for relief. So I really want to find out a platform in the international arena where I can go and see that, look, this is what is happening to my country. 52 countries are going under the water, and my country, 1/3 will go under the water. So I think both for the national lawmakers and the international policymakers, it is very important to recognize the crimes that are being committed against nature and that are irreversible in nature, to consider these crimes very seriously, and to really have a forum, a platform, or different platforms, more than one platform, where people, the communities who are aggrieved, can go and get legal remedy against the perpetrators. Situation can't continue like this. And I think the reason why Ecocide is important at both national and international level is that way you can actually redefine the development model, which will not be very charging on the nature and Mother Earth. So with these words, I would conclude here. I'm sorry, but I'll have to leave. So if there are quick questions for me or comments for me, I think I can address those.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Rizwana. Thank you for making time for us in your busy schedule. It's wonderful to see you. And you were also the last speaker on our panel, which allows us now to go over to the questions. And we have 2 questions in the chat, and I'll address them. And if you feel you would like to answer them, then the floor goes first to you, Rizwana. The questions concern primarily of who could be the perpetrator of the crime of ecocide. There's a question from Simon Awad, who asks, is ecocide considered a crime against individuals, companies, or by individuals, companies, or governments? And the other question concerns the issue whether oil companies could be seen as committing ecocide, as they are destroying ecosystems due to the release of greenhouse gas emissions and influencing climate change. Now, Rizwana, if you feel inclined to answer any of these questions, then the floor goes to you first.
I think the other panels are better placed to answer these questions, but from my perspective, I can tell you that there are company heads who in their individual capacity can be held liable. When science is clear about damaging impact of fossil fuel use, then political leadership who continue to deny may be held accountable. So at the international level, I think the law is clear. In the national level, a lot would depend on how you define ecocide, which offenses do you include in it, what is the scale that you define, and how effective your national legal system is to actually punish those economic interests.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Rizwana. All the best to you. I'm happy to also point the question to the other members of the panel. As I said, the question is ecocide considered to be a crime that can be committed by individuals, companies, and or governments? And what about climate change and the contribution by fossil fuel companies through CO2 release? Who would like to take the floor? You can just raise your hand or your finger. Jojo?
Yeah, I'm happy to comment, and obviously welcome further comments as well. In terms of the responsibility of, who would be the perpetrator, who would be prosecuted, it depends on the jurisdiction. So at the International Criminal Court, the focus is on individuals, not on companies, not on governments. And one of the interesting aspects of that is that unlike other areas of international law, which focus on state actions and state responsibility, the individual focus enables the potential prosecution of private individuals, or potentially, for example, individuals in corporations. And certainly in the context of peacetime ecocide, this is a very relevant consideration. It's also very relevant from a deterrence perspective. Of course, when ecocide is transposed in regional or national legislation, this may vary. What we can say from experience so far is that, for example, in the EU Environmental Crime Directive, there is provision for prosecution of companies and sentencing that is relevant to individuals and to companies. And there is also a focus, for example, on whether permits issued for certain activities have been obtained in fraudulent or coercive ways, for example, which is also very relevant in the context of ecocide. And where we've seen national proposals being put forward, they do also usually include responsibility at the corporate level as well. So it does vary a bit from jurisdiction to jurisdiction. And then from our perspective, in the context of the climate question, things like cumulative emissions are quite hard to pin down. There may be circumstances in the future where the thing is with criminal law is because you have to be able to isolate a particular act or omission that has caused a particular event or series of events, if you like. The threshold is quite high. That doesn't mean that that would not apply potentially in certain cases in climate. However, we anticipate that initial prosecutions are more likely to be in the arena of, for example, direct pollution, because we know there are a great number of lawyers who are eager to begin to use this legal tool, and certainly they will want early case law and early jurisprudence to bring up to develop clear sort of pointers and precedents for moving forward with ecocide law. And there are other potential different kinds of legal avenues that have perhaps been more focused on in the climate context. So, for example, climate litigation cases, or indeed the advisory opinion avenue, which Vanuatu has led many countries to supporting at the International Court of Justice. And that advisory opinion is now anticipated in the coming months, giving legal advice to states on their obligations and in light of existing law with respect to climate change. I think that's as much as I can come in with right now.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jojo. Also, because Ecocide in those jurisdictions where it is now being adopted or contemplated, as you highlighted, Jojo, can most likely not be applied retroactively, capturing past emissions. That would be against the legality principle. So it would only capture current and then potentially future acts and omissions, but nothing that has happened in the past when that at the time when that crime did not exist, which is a bit of a challenge when it comes to climate impacts due to past emissions, but something that may have to be discussed in the application of the crime. Let me quickly check the questions. There is one more question by Simon Watkins of the Conflict Environment Observatory, asking, is there sufficient interaction with international law concerning military conflict to enable governments to be held accountable for ecocide resulting from military activities during warfare? And that might be a link to the recent input that was being sought by the Office of the Prosecutor of the ICC on what can already be done under the existing war crimes in the Rome Statute. Anyone who would like to address this question?
Again, I'm happy to come in with some simple responses to that. It's not my deep area of expertise, but it is certainly the case that in the context of conflict, there is more provision already in place than in the context of peacetime, where there is quite clearly a gap in regards to severe environmental harm. In our experience, in a sense, the effect of ecocide law in the context of conflict would be somewhat different. In peacetime, its primary aim would be as a deterrent and a preventive. That may or may not prove useful in the same way during a time of conflict, but what it can do is create additional justiciability for particularly egregious acts that lead directly to environmental harm. But what it also does, and this has been very interesting to see in the light of, for example, Ukraine's comments over the last couple of years around ecocide and environmental harm during wartime, is that bringing the conversation into that arena has raised awareness of how serious and how important it is to pay attention to environmental harm in wartime. Historically, we are obviously understandably completely focused on human harm to hospitals, schools, infrastructure, business, very, very immediate effects of on-the-ground conflict, but it is often the environmental harm that reaches the furthest. I mean, environmental harm tends not to respect political borders, but also in terms of the temporal effect. So, there are now areas of Ukraine, areas of Gaza, areas of Congo that will be difficult, and other places in the world that will be difficult to restore to health or to agricultural availability, even potentially for decades or even for generations. So this is the discussion of ecocide in that context is very important in kind of, in a sense, revealing something that's been there all the time, but that kind of hidden in plain sight. I hope that helps a little bit.
Thank you so much, Jojo. We are coming towards the very last moments of our webinar. Let me ask one question, maybe to the wider panel. We've heard that both in the Latin American context, in the Asian context, in the African context, there is still quite a long way to go in designing, adopting, implementing ecocide laws in national context or regional context. And my question would be to the panel members, what would, in your view, help to bring more momentum into the initiatives? Would it be capacity building initiatives? Would it be mobilizing stakeholders? Would it be seminars or meetings on exchanging best practices, lessons learned? Or would it perhaps be a model law? I think one of the panelists was talking about the possibility of a model law that could be implemented as it fits in different jurisdictions. What would be good ways? There might be combinations of ways forward on how to bring forward ecocide laws and their implementation, of course, where they exist in the different regions that we've heard about today. Can I ask some of the regional speakers? Gustavo, please. Yes.
Yes. Thank you, Christina. I would suggest that, as I mentioned before, we may find the positive links that there may be between, for example, the Escazú Agreement in the Americas, and Ecocide. I think, as I mentioned before, there's a great opportunity because the Escazú Agreement, as you know, talks about access to environmental justice. So I think that we can find there a way to go. Another avenue, I was thinking about the possibility of involving the Organization of American States, the OAS. As it was mentioned before, that United Nations have already supported this. How can we assure that the General Assembly of the OAS can recognize the consequences of ecocide as a cause of violation of human rights? Another way to see this in a positive way is that I believe very much that ecocide may contribute very much to reduce impunity, because I think people will think this twice if it's categorized as a crime, And also I believe that ecocide, recognizing ecocide as a crime may give more protection also to environmental defenders, Just in the case of Mexico last year, 25 environmental defenders were killed in the country, And finally, you were talking about capacity and about training, etc. I do believe that governments do have to have the proper, for example, the proper prosecutors, to deal with ecocide. I think we have to have strong institutions to really enforce our environmental codes, something that in many countries is not happening today, And also, we need to have in our hands the proof, because sometimes to have the proof of ecocide may be difficult, So how can we assure that we're going to have those proof to assure that somebody has committed ecocide and they will have to go to jail or pay an economic fine, etc. And finally, Christina, I would like to put before the floor the international link also that exists between, for example, deforestation and organized crime, no? Because these are things that we will have to deal with them at the national level, but also internationally speaking, no? So we have to see how we're going to deal with both things at the same time. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gustavo. Ian, I also see your hand is up. Ian?
Thank you. If you are watching this video, or either live or the recording of it, evidently you have an interest in Ecocide. If you live in a democracy, there are people who represent your interests. You have representation. But if your MP or congressman or woman doesn't know that you're interested, how can they represent you? So this is a call out to people who are watching this to become at least a little bit politically active. I'm not particularly interested in politics, as in this party says this and that party says that, but as a conservationist, whoever has the responsibility of running a country is who we have to deal with. And for Ecocide law, there needs to be an upswelling of public support. Now, I know that Stop Ecocide has a Earth Protectors scheme where you pay a $5 and then you're on the list of people demanding this. That's one way, through NGOs to represent you, but formal representation in whatever government you have, they need to hear from you. I'm talking to the people who are watching this. Yes, you up there. Whether it's right now live or on a recording, it's not too late to act. Contact by email, by letter, by knocking on their door and say, why are you not vocal on this important issue that we're protecting our home, the biosphere, the planet where we live? And that's where we get things done. People power.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Ian. And I think these are wonderful final words in this really round and wide and deep webinar that we've had today. Many different perspectives, as we set at the outset of this webinar, that we will bring together. And I think hopefully you all agree that we lived up to our promise with our wonderful, excellent expert panel speakers. I would like to thank all of you who spoke today for taking your time, for sharing your insights with us and with the audience. And I'd like to thank the audience for having endured our technical challenges in the beginning, and then of course have stayed on with us for the time of the discussion. Thanks also to the interpreters and the technicians behind the scenes, without whom this is always impossible. And it is our hope, of course, that you have heard encouraging ideas and words in order to support the motion 61 and hopefully vote for it at the upcoming IUCN World Conservation Congress in Abu Dhabi, as well as at AMCEN for the African states. Now, if you have any further questions on Ecocide law, on the initiative, on the motion, please feel free to contact the Stop Ecocide Foundation. And I think, Jojo, I asked you to put the emails perhaps in the chat. I won't read them out because it's too cumbersome, but please contact maybe Jojo to start with, if she can read her emails, or the Stop Ecocide Foundation for any further questions. And with that, big thanks to everyone one last time, and see you soon. All the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everyone.